Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cave of the Cross Apologetics. I'm Patrick.
I'm Tony.
And we're digging into our book, What About Evil? Defense of God's Sovereign Glory by Scott Christensen. And we kind of did the prelude, and we had Dr. Anderson come on to sort of keep our mind fresh about what we talked about when concerning the Christian worldview. And now we're digging into kind of what one of his other book series does, but we're doing the longer book.
Right.
And we're taking a look at, well,
the bigger book.
Right. Does Christianity, does God himself offer us an explanation to why is there so much evil and suffering in the world? Yeah. What do we do about that? We look out upon creation and we see, is God, invalid to overcome our free will, and what's happened is it really the devil versus God, and they're in a big arm wrestling match,
dualistic fight.
Yeah. You got the devil on your shoulder and the angel on your shoulder, and they're fighting via Bugs Bunny, or is there some reason that all this is happening? And so that's what Scott Christensen is putting forth. And the great thing, if you watched the last episode with it, he's already given us not only a breakdown chapter by chapter of what the book is about, the answer, and the reason for the answer.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Hiding the answer in the front of the book. So you've done it. You've completed the book, and now it's just filler from here. And so we're starting with chapter 2, Theodicy and the Crisis of Our Secular Age. And the first time I read this, I put it out on Twitter that I really enjoyed this chapter because this did what I was in a metaphysics class, and you have to present some of the articles, and one of the articles I chose, of course, was Defense of God. But the one article that I did, which was like 12 pages, 6 of the pages covered everything I learned in my intro to philosophy class, and I was like, oh, this is really neat. And so here, Scott Christensen does what I took a full semester and hundreds of dollars to do. He condenses into one chapter the modern worldview, and he does it from kind of that perspective of
and then
evil insight.
Yeah, and then he gives us some reasons, I guess, why the modern worldview is in the predicament that it's in. Right? Why we have there's meaninglessness that is all over the place and prevails, and so he's gonna talk about the crisis of our secular age. Yeah,
right? I've seen more people be open to talking about kind of how the Enlightenment, how we kind of think, oh, the Enlightenment brought us all these things, but some people that I've been reading about recently have been calling that into question, which is ironic because the Enlightenment age called into question tradition, and now we're calling back into Enlightenment age. So everything's circular, especially in science. This is the revolution part, and so for the Marxist or the anarchist, the good or the bad anarchist, hopefully you'll enjoy this chapter because I certainly did going through it. And so he starts out this chapter with talking about this really famous earthquake in 1755 in Lisbon, a Lisbon earthquake. It was measured at 8.5, 9.1 on the magnitude scale, which is huge. It's devastating. Lisbon laid in ruin for nearly 6 years. The devastation extended far beyond the city, affecting some close to 6 million square miles of the Earth's surface. Big, making an unprecedented disaster. All in all, some 30,000 to 40,000 people died with little to no warning. And so that's where he launches off.
So he says the toll of the Great Lisbon earthquake could not be limited, though, just to the lives claims and the material destruction that it wrought. It shook the world in far more devastating ways, right? People began to view things in a different light as a result of this earthquake. For the first time since Christianity had transformed the Western world, God came under broad, serious public assault for the problem of pain, evil, and suffering, he tells us. Lisbon put cracks in the West's long-standing confidence in a wise, powerful, benevolent God. Philosophers, theologians, professors, statesmen, pastors, priests, men of letters were all asking the same questions, right? Which were, Did the Creator care about the deaths of innocent people? Could he hear the cries of of desperation when disaster hit? Why did he not prevent this disaster in the first place? So it allowed people to begin to question the Christian worldview and their view of God and their view of God's, mercy and goodness and grace and that sort of thing. The basic problem of evil. Why does God allow this to happen?
Right. And here's a natural disaster is what we would call it. So there's no terroristic element. You can't point to, here's man's ultimate view of evil embodied in this group of people.
So that would be a moral evil, right?
Sure.
So there's a distinction here between natural evil and moral evil.
Right.
And this would be a natural evil is what it's usually called, as opposed to when we kill each other, which is a moral evil. Right.
Yeah. But there it's different. And so if you're kind of wanting to get a flavor of this as well, I did for Revive Studios. They had John Gill was a preacher, and there was this big storm, and I think several years later on an anniversary, he has a sermon that talks about that. So he covers just a little bit of kind of the problem of evil, but he ties it in to Jesus' own ministry and the need for faith, the need for trust within the understanding of that. And so I'll include the link at that below. But this kind of has that same one where that storm was localized to Britain here. It had, as we were talking about, ramifications that philosophers and scientists and just people had of where was God in all this, or why did he allow this to happen? So the section, the Enlightenment attack on biblical theism. Here's the clash of worldviews that we're always kind of wanting to highlight. The Lisbon earthquake came at a moment in history as the Enlightenment was coming to prominence. The Enlightenment has marked the most momentous shift in Western civilization since the advent of Christianity in the first century, which I think is fairly certain. Christianity, there's the Bible passage of these men turned the world upside down, and the fall of the Roman Empire is, it was such a solidifying movement, a regime. All roads led to Rome is incredibly accurate. The language unified the entire earth. If you didn't speak the language, you could be killed easily because of how much. And then over expansion, it split into two kingdoms, which I'm sure the Jews viewed in some capacity as irony there. And so you had Christianity kind of fill the void that it shouldn't have.
In the 4th century when Constantine kind of, said, hey, we're going to make Rome a Christian country, basically, right? Or
at least stop killing them for a while. That would have been nice.
Yeah, and so then things began to take off. And for the next, 1,000 years, right, or so, more actually. Christianity was the worldview. It ruled how people's thoughts, especially in the West.
And so you also had, not just secularism kind of a highlight here, but you had kind of the Reformation point as well, and wanting to Advantes, go back to the sources, and you had kind of the idea of, well, you can't just trust the experts anymore. You kind of have to figure out for yourself. And so all these things, I wish I had a good book to recommend to you. Maybe I will in the comment section on the Enlightenment, just how important it is. But picking up, even going through probably Wikipedia or finding a good video on the Enlightenment would help you if you don't know much about this moment in history. But it's definitely a kind of a match strike within history of at least our modern world. So the Enlightenment would change how people thought not only about God, but about man, creation, morality. Science became really prominent here, classifying things, putting things into kingdoms, phylums, and all those things really kind of honed out here. It would radically alter theology, epistemology, science, and ethics. Its conception of God stripped him of virtually all he has revealed of himself in Scripture, instead of equally transcendent and immanent personal God to whom we owe everything. He was regarded merely as an abstract supreme being who dealt with his cosmos and his creatures through impersonal secondary causes. And so the deism kind of comes here. Every founding fathers claimed, they weren't Christian, they were deists. And I think on one hand, Christians tend to overclaim Christianity, but also deists or people that want to push for a deistic idea.
Overclaim that.
Overclaim that. Yeah. So everyone hates that. Thomas Jefferson exacto knifed his Bible away, but then you also have to realize he's trying to take that scripture to people like Native Americans who could understand it easier, and he was trying to. He thought he was helping God in a little bit of trying to get the highfalutin miracles out of the way. So looking at history not just as did you know? Okay, we need to kind of take a good general overview, and going back to the sources, taking primary sources really helps in that. So that's a little aside preaching.
Yeah. So with the biblical God relegated to the periphery of the ideas and that sort of thing because of the influence of the Enlightenment, man became the measure of all things in the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment took the idolizing of man to the extreme, right? Human reason, as opposed to divine revelation, right, began to revolt against its place of subservient to divine revelation, and it eventually replaced it altogether. So now reason rules as opposed to what God has to say. Reason was no longer explained and corrected by revelation. Instead, it became hostile to biblical truth, resulting in the rise of the historical critical method that sought to erode the inspiration, authority, and sufficiency of Scripture. So what we moved from then in the pre-Enlightenment time was a situation where, at least in the West, where revelation was our source of knowledge and everything else, right? The divine revelation, so the scriptures. And then the Enlightenment said, well, wait a minute, our reasoning, we can reason. In fact, Thomas Aquinas tried to put this revelation and reason together when he got a hold of Aristotle, right? And, because he argued that, hey, why is it that secular people can have knowledge? And he said, well, it's because God has given everybody this capacity to reason, right? And so reason then began to take over. And, of course, the Enlightenment time, Kant and others, emphasized that reason was king, as it were. It was superior. It was the main source of knowledge, right?
Yeah, we went from in the beginning God, or had God said, to then I think, therefore I am. Yeah. Descartes' famous summation of 3 days in a cabin that upends the world there too. And so you have that shift, and Descartes, unfortunately, the Roman Catholic himself, I don't know if he knew the influence that he would have, but there's his place in history. So as a result of all of this, divine revelation took a blow. All truth claims about religious faith are subject no longer to what God might say, but to human reason. If I can't think it, then what good is having this outside source? It needs to originate from me, or I need to understand it, something along those lines. The dismantling of the Christian theistic foundation for epistemology, that's the theory of knowledge, how we know things, and science meant the same for ethics. Why should we do things? Why ought we do things? Whoa, what are shoulds and oughts there as well? The Enlightenment sought to ground ethics in something other than God. Ethics is in the so-called Age of Reason began to be rooted in the notion of universal rational principles, not in a sovereign and virtuous God. So there you have, Aristotle, the forms, idealism coming through, and all that.
Yeah. And so his next section he entitles Lisbon and Knight's The Modern Crisis of Theology, right? And he says the trail of the Enlightenment to the present post-Christian era in the West is littered with tragic attempts to find meaning without the true God, right? So he says perhaps no one highlighted the mounting doubts about the power and goodness of God in the face of evil as much as Voltaire. In the wake of the Lisbon earthquake, Voltaire questioned the optimism, especially promoted by Leibniz, right? Our good friend Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, right? And his idea of the best of all possible worlds, Theodicy, where God, this is the best of all possible worlds, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. And we covered that a little bit, and on the bottom of the screen, I'll remind us from time to time what those are, the six that Christensen presents as different theodicy.
Yeah, he gives us a summary here, right?
So according to Leibniz, an all-wise God would create only that world that he would deem best. Okay, thus any imperfections, i.e., moral and natural evils contained in such world would have to have some optimally good purpose that outweighed any apparent ill effects. Right. So just, in order for humans to live, we have to breathe air. One of the nasty things about air is it's got pollution in it. In order for mankind to survive and continue to survive, they'd have to find heat sources. Burning things is detrimental. Therefore, people get some form of cancer or sickness of the lungs and would just die as a result. Well, okay, it's because we breathe air. Well, no, that's just the best possible world. That was the best means for us to continue on in some fashion so that the world could exist. And it's a poor attempt to try and point to that, but that would be a kind of a, even though we would have death by pollution, we'd still be able to breathe, which is a good, because we continue to survive in that environment. Therefore, Leibniz argued that for the best of all possible worlds to come about, evil is necessary.
Yeah, so the idea here, and we saw it earlier, as you mentioned, right, that God is perfect. And so if this is the world that a perfect God created, and it has evil in it, then obviously a perfect good God, somehow the evil accomplishes a good purpose for a perfectly good God, right? That's basically what he said. So this has to be the best of all worlds because it was created by God who is perfect and good, right? Yeah. And so if this world contains evil, then obviously evil has some good purposes because a perfectly good God created this world. That's the basic idea, right? That's what he's getting at here.
Yeah, and so if you're around people who develop systems for a living, I've been watching some alternative history on the moon landings and a really good show there, and I've been picking up real life things that happen. And just we all knew that we were going to go to the moon via these giant rockets that had so much blasting power. And then once you got there with the rocket, you need to blast off from the surface of the moon. It's depicted in all the old serials that you watch with the guys with big metal helmets. And so they're trying to develop this system of, okay, this is how we know it's happening. And so here's this guy that comes along and says, no, let's do like a 2-stage rocket. Let's shoot up this thing that we'll relay with. We use less fuel that way. And so, okay, that kind of solved the problem. But that book, which I'll include for anyone that wants to read it, was really interesting just to show the mindset and trying to get something moving like, NASA, just to get two dudes in a metal container to another world. Here, God is creating an entire new world, and he's got to fit everything together so that it works out well. So according to Leibniz, this all-wise God would create only a world that he would deem best. And so his optimism, however, was interrupted with a satirical disdain. So Leibniz was. Yeah,
they made actually poems right out of it. And on page 24 it says, "All's well." So this is Voltaire's kind of satirical criticism of Leibniz, right? "All's well, you say, and all is necessary." So that's what Leibniz says, right? All's well, and all you say, and all is necessary. "Think you this universe had been the worse without the hellish gift Gulf and Portugal? Are ye so sure the great eternal cause that knows all things and for itself creates could not have placed us in this dreary clime without volcanoes, seizing near our feet. Right? Are you sure?
Volcanoes
Leibniz,
must
right?
happen. It's a necessary evil.
Right.
And it's the best possible world to include volcanoes.
Yeah. And so, he's suggesting here that it created a crisis here with regard to this theodicy.